Would you like to accelerate your career and reach your full potential in just minutes a day? Welcome to the LEADx Show with New York Times best-selling author and Inc. 500 entrepreneur, Kevin Kruse.
What is so special about the military's green notebook? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LEADx Show, where we're helping you to stand out and to get ahead. At LEADx, we are democratizing leadership. That's exactly what we're doing. We offer free leadership training and professional development to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Visit our website, leadx.org, to check out the free course of the day. Today, I discuss all things leadership with a U.S. Army officer. We talk about the power of taking notes by hand rather than on your laptop or on your phone, and of keeping your notebooks around as part of your legacy. And he helps me to get a military perspective on several topics that I'm writing about in my next book: authenticity, rules, work-life balance. And he offers some good reading recommendations. In fact, there's so much good stuff here, and I like to keep each episode short. I want it to fit inside your morning commute, that we've broken this interview into two parts. So enjoy today's show and come back tomorrow for the conclusion. Today's tip is a change elevator pitch. Leading through change can be tough. A new process, a merger of two companies, new software, whatever. But one tool you can use is a change elevator pitch. We usually think of an elevator pitch as something we do for personal branding or sales, but in a way, you will be selling the change to many people. A succinct change elevator pitch will address your team's fears and provide a clear path forward in about 4 sentences or less. For example, first, just explain. Here's what our change initiative is all about. Second, tie back to original business goals. This change is important because, and again, this is tying it back for why it's good for the business. Third, personalize it. Here's what success will look like for you. And then finally, indicate direct action. What happens next? Here's what we need from you in order to move forward. Be honest. Don't hide the truth, especially if this change will increase the workload or the hours or a shift in responsibilities. Our guest today is an officer in the United States Army with over 13 years of experience in garrison and combat environments. He served 2 tours in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and is the recipient of 2 Bronze Stars and 1 Purple Heart. He writes frequently on the topic of leadership and has published articles in Army Magazine, Military Review, Small Wars Journal, and many others. His blog is From the Green Notebook. Our guest is Major Joe Byerly. And today, Major Byerly's thoughts are his own and do not represent the United States Army or the Department of Defense. Joe, thanks for your ongoing service and welcome to the LEADx Show.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me.
Now, I read in your bio at the beginning of the show, Joe, a little bit about your background, and, you've done a whole lot out there, but I've got listeners in over 150 countries now, all around the world. And I've never served in the military myself. My father was a Marine, and his stories from boot camp in the 50s scared the heck out of me. So I never joined up myself. But tell us about, your recent experiences in the Army, and then segue from that and tell us about your blog, which is called From the Green Notebook.
Okay, Kevin. Yeah, so I recently served as the executive officer for 1st Stryker Brigade Combat Team from the 4th Infantry Division out at Fort Carson, Colorado. And in that job as the XO, I was essentially the chief of staff for a 4,500 soldier brigade combat team, and our mission was to deploy anywhere within the world within 72 hours to meet our nation's call. And so for my job specifically was to ensure the synchronization of all those moving pieces, both in training and on the deployment side, if that situation ever arose. Also, I managed a fairly large budget. And then finally, I managed the readiness for both the soldiers and the equipment. So, made sure that everyone remained healthy, that all 4,500 of those soldiers could get out the door, and that everyone had a vehicle that worked. and a weapon that shot. So that was my last assignment. That was a very challenging yet rewarding assignment.
Now that's a big responsibility, 4,500 soldiers. And how long were you in that role?
So I had transitioned that role for a couple months, and then prior to that, I was doing that exact same job for 600 soldiers. So it was a pretty good jump for me at the time.
Right. And I mentioned how I didn't explain in the early part of the show to my listeners, I should have. The way I found you was I was doing research for my next leadership book, which won't be out till next year. And over again, as I was searching for examples and thoughts about different subjects, and often I'd be Googling and I'd be adding like plus army, plus military, plus soldiers, to round out my own understanding of a topic. I kept coming up to a blog called From the Green Notebook, all kinds of topics that those of us in the corporate world, topics that we're familiar with, you're writing about them and taking a military perspective. So, when did you start this blog and why is it called the Green Notebook?
So I started the blog about 4 years ago, and it's something that we take for granted in the military, but when you take a step back, it really is kind of a cool idea, cool concept. So in every supply room, and this isn't just the Army, this is the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, we have these small green notebooks that anyone can sign out and take with them. They fit in your cargo pocket, and typically in our culture, you bring your green notebook everywhere with you. And so your green notebook contains everything from to-do list to meeting notes to your notes from a leader professional development session you went to, notes from training, and then lessons learned from your training events, because we're constantly learning as we train in the military. And so in essence, these books represent the collective knowledge of the Army. So I just thought that I would provide a platform to share my experiences at first, but then I found that there are so many people across the military that just have these great stories and great lessons learned on leadership they can share. So over the last 4 years, we've had everybody from enlisted soldiers, those are soldiers that in a lot of instances haven't been to college yet, all the way up to four-star generals.
Wow.
Posting on the blog. So it's really been great. And we've also brought a lot of authors in and people outside the military who have, a lesson to share that resonates in our community.
And Joe, what I love about this, I didn't realize that those notebooks were all over the place and in the branches. For many years now, I carry this black notebook around. And when I was doing research on my book, 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management, that's one of the 15 secrets. What people kept telling me over and over again was that, and Richard Branson says, like, his number one tool is his notebook. He's like, I would not have been able to become a billionaire without this little notebook. And that's what I tell people is like, you've got to write it down and then you keep those notebooks. And I was feeling kind of cocky, Joe, because I'd look out on my bookshelf and I've got, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 black notebooks lined up. And I brag about like, look, this is going to be like my legacy. This is my life. I've been snooping on your social media and you've got people putting pictures up of like, I don't know, it's like 30, 40, 50 green notebooks. There's some general that you posted a picture of who has all of his green notebooks from his career just stacked up right there.
Right, and it's not just any general too. That was General Robert Abrams.
Oh wow!
His father's Creighton Abrams, who we named the Abrams tank after today. Right. But he's currently the Force Com commander, so he's the guy in charge of the readiness and training for all the soldiers stateside right now. And that's 30 years of notebooks was the picture he shared. But what was great about it is I found that in we recently ran a hashtag My Green Notebook. I had leaders from Australia, from the United Kingdom, taking pictures of their notebooks and posting them online. So it really does work.
Oh yeah, it was really, and it's inspiring, right? Now, how many notebooks do you think you filled up at this point?
The good thing about me is it's not a good training exercise unless I lose my notebook somewhere during the training exercise. So my notebooks are not on a bookshelf. They're spread across post and probably across the globe right now, different locations, but several.
Now, let me ask you this. This is sort of a curveball question for you. So when I go out and talk to people about you got to carry this notebook, What I get all the time, especially from maybe the people who are, still in their 20s is, that's old school. Like now I take notes, but I just type everything into my phone. So what do you say to that? I mean, is it like, hey, it doesn't really matter? Or you think there's something better about actually writing it in your green notebook?
I recently wrote about this topic. There have been studies that were done, I believe it was at Stanford, and the researchers found that writing down actually helps you retain knowledge better than if you were to type it out. So I do feel like the process of actually taking the time to think through something and your hand moving with a pen or pencil across a piece of paper helps you retain the information way better than just tapping a keyboard or a iPad.
Yeah, and listeners out there, I think that's completely right. And I think the study that Joe's referring to is called, if you Google "the pen is mightier than the keyboard," you'll find that study. And they're talking about when you type, you become like a transcriptionist. You're just sort of recording the words without having to do that cognitive process. Because you can't write as fast as someone speaking, it's forcing you to sort of process it and summarize it, and then you remember it better. So I'm all with you. There is the pen is mightier than the keyboard. And Joe, I think the article that first caught my attention, I was writing about. And I'm right now working on a new course about how to give effective feedback. And you wrote I think you were the author of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the article was called "The Art of Giving Negative Feedback." And was that one you authored, or was that a guest author?
That's one that I wrote, and that was based off me connecting my experiences with a book I had recently read called "Stop Talking and Start Communicating" by Dr. Jeffrey Tumlin.
Oh, that's great. And what surprised me is, again, from the outsider perspective, when it comes to feedback, I know in the corporate world, managers don't do a good job of giving feedback because, they don't want the fight, or they just don't want to, kick up a storm or whatever. But my view would be in the military, from the movies and everything, it's like, if you've got rank, you're given that feedback and you don't really care how it's received or perceived. And yet you wrote, "We in the military don't always do a great job of giving folks the cold, hard truth about their performance." So that surprises me. Why do you think people are holding back or not given the cold, hard truth?
Kevin, I think it's because it's human nature. I think for most people, you want to lift others up. You want to make other people feel good. Don't get me wrong. There are folks out there that have no problems telling somebody that they're doing a horrible job. But I just think that naturally it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to sit there and look somebody across the desk. And a lot of times in the military too, just because of how the officer and NCO structure works out, you may be 23 years old talking to somebody who's twice your age and who has 3 times more experience than you do about their performance. And so it's hard and it's uncomfortable for people. So I think that's a big thing. But I think that deep down that if you truly care about the folks that work for you and you care about their development and they're getting better, then you're doing them a favor by telling them, hey, this is where you're failing. This is where you're falling short in. And you're actually hurting them when you sugarcoat it or, you just avoid the topic altogether. And just from my experience in the military, I find that those relationships always end in a dead end because there's not that communication there. The person that's working for you is not meeting your expectations. They're not meeting their performance objectives. And then eventually, you have to give them a bad evaluation, which is way worse than having that initial conversation 3-4 months, a year before that to tell them, hey, these are some areas that you can work on. And it's been my experience too that when you do tell somebody that, hey, this is where you're failing right now and this is what you need to work on, they actually try to get better at it. And I've seen people go from being the worst performing soldier to being one of the top 2 or 3 once they receive that critical and very important feedback.
Now, in the private sector, I mean, every company is different, but in the big companies, it's traditional to do like an end of year annual performance review, which most people groan at. It's like 1 to 5 scales on a bunch of things. But in the Army, is it something similar? Because you mentioned doing their evaluation.
It is, and we do in the military. We do an annual evaluation, and as part of that, you're supposed to do a quarterly counseling. So by the time the person gets that evaluation, there should be plenty of conversations between that initial counseling and their final evaluation to where you were able to get your performance objectives in there, and they were able to work and develop those.
Now, I'll put you on the spot. Thinking back on your career, was there ever a time when you were given maybe some direct feedback about something specific, which maybe stung in the moment, but made you a better soldier?
Oh, yes. Just my recent job being the executive officer for the last 13 years, I was very operations focused. And that's all the fun stuff. The stuff that's not so much fun is the maintenance of the equipment, the managing of a budget. And those were all new concepts to me. And so when I first took over that job, my boss sat down with me and said, "Hey, you're failing here, here, and here." And it hurt so bad because I had done so well previously, just to be told that I wasn't doing as great anymore. And so I just attacked those weaknesses and really concentrated on them. And I worked with my boss too to, develop a way ahead. Hey, these are some very specific, concrete steps you can take to get better. And and over time, I went from, I was selected to move up from that, 500-600 person unit to that 4,500 person unit. And it was because of that tough feedback I got in the beginning.
That's great. And, I don't know how familiar you are with, there's sort of a strengths-based leadership movement that Gallup kind of started putting out where it's saying identify your strengths and lean into those. And a lot of people have misinterpreted that to believe we can ignore our weaknesses. Let's not worry about developing our weaker areas. Let's just pick a strength or two. But even the Gallup guys, when they're asked about that, they said, no. If there's an area of development that you need to reach a standard on to do your job, you definitely need to focus in those areas. It's not ignore your weakness. It's just identify and play to your strengths. So it's good to hear that's been your experience too.
It has been. And I found too that as you move up within an organization, I'm sure it's the same in the private sector, that your scope of responsibilities it's greater. And so, yeah, your weakness may not come into play now, but it may come into play 3, 4, 5 years down the road when when the scope of your responsibilities is way greater than it was previously. So I think it is important that we focus on our weaknesses and try to improve those areas.
Now, there's another topic a different chapter in my book is about, I'm obsessed with time, and a lot of people wouldn't think time and productivity is a leadership topic, but to me it really is because, you need to be very efficient and productive. It's both be good with the people stuff and the task stuff. And when I first started looking at examples of this, I was studying sports coaches, and I was surprised that a lot of the great basketball coaches, John Wooden, Coach K, football coach, New York Giants, Tom Coughlin, when you read their books, they're talking about scheduling practices down to the minute, scheduling, the seasons down to the 5-minute, 15-minute chunks. And I myself sort of preach a to-do, a lot of the things on your to-do list will never get done. If you want to get it done, then you actually schedule it. And you wrote, again, I found doing research, there was an article, The 5 Rules for Balancing Military and Career Life. And, you don't have to go into all 5 of the rules, but, what are your views on balancing military and career?
I don't think that you're able to actually balance anything. I think that either you're giving your family everything or you're giving your work everything. And it's just managing when you're going to be giving work and when you're going to be giving your family time. And so I found that if I'm not good with my own personal time management, that time will slip away from me. And next thing you know, I've gone several weeks without eating dinner with my family or spending time with my family. So I do my best to do exactly what you're talking about, Kevin, is instead of, keeping a just straight to-do list, but try to schedule things. And then from the family aspect too, one of the things that we try to do as a family is continually schedule events. Because if we just say, hey, I think we're going to go try to do something this weekend Friday's going to roll around. I'm going to be tired. I don't want to do that. It was a crazy week at work. And then next thing you know, I'm sitting there watching football all week and eating Cheetos and drinking beer and not really doing anything positive with my family. So one of the things that we try to do as a family is continually schedule events, just either, date nights, short little weekend trips, and then we always schedule, either a big fall vacation or a summer vacation, and we make sure that's blocked off and on the calendar. And when I do those things, I'm giving all my attention to them and not, continually slipping back into work mode.
I noticed something interesting in the comments on that particular blog post. You get some good comments and almost universally, positive and supportive. And this one kicked up some conversation. It was sort of like easy for an officer to say, right? There was a little bit of like, well, officers have, don't understand how hard, and they can just, order everybody else to do their stuff. I mean, what's your reaction to that? I mean, is that just sort of, a cop out for someone not taking more ownership for scheduling family time and things like that? Or do you think there really is a difference there?
I think it varies. Leadership varies from unit to unit. You may have somebody that gives 1,000 tasks and then goes home at 5 o'clock with the expectation that everything's going to get done by 5:30 the next morning. So that does happen, but I think generally, across the board, a lot of times we do fail to manage both aspects of our lives. And so, the military is very rewarding. We get ribbons, we get awards, we get coins. So there's always something tangible to chase. And a lot of soldiers, leaders get wrapped up in that. And then, they'll kind of put their families on the back burner because of it. And so that's one thing that, organizations I've been a part of, I've tried to have those conversations with folks to talk about expectations and, hey, our goal today is 5:30. We're going to get out of here by that time. And then, so you can spend time with your family. It's not always possible.
Right.
And when you're constantly training, constantly worried about preparedness to go to war, a lot of times, that does end up consuming you, and you do miss out on a couple dinners. But I'd say that it's something that every leader in the military struggles with at one point in their careers.
Friends, before we go, remember, at LEADx, we're on a mission to give free leadership training and professional development to everyone, anywhere, at any time. Visit leadx.org, that is, to check out our course of the day. Or visit leadx.org/Branson to download our free ebook, Richard Branson's 7 Secrets to Leadership. And please take one quick minute. Go to leadx.org/subscribe to subscribe and leave a rating for this podcast, the LEADx Leadership Show. leadx.org/subscribe. Until next time, remember, you have incredible influence on those around you, your family, your team at work, your community. We all need you to lead mindfully. How will you lead today?